Everyone knows the Irish are Celts. It's in the music, in the myths, in the knotwork, in the very word, Celtic. For centuries it has been the beating heart of what it means to be Irish. An ancient Celtic people, descended from tribes who swept across Europe and made a green island at the edge of the world their own. There's just one problem. According to their own DNA, the Irish were never actually Celtic. Not by blood. And what the Irish actually are turns out to be older, deeper, and far more remarkable than the label that's been stamped on them for centuries. Because hidden in the DNA of the Irish people is one of the oldest and most unbroken human stories in all of Western Europe. A story that was already ancient before the word Celtic was ever spoken on that island. So if the Irish aren't genetically Celtic, who are they? DNA has finally answered. And the answer doesn't diminish Irish identity. It makes it far older than anyone imagined. This is the story the history books got completely backwards. Here's the version everyone's taught. The Irish are the westernmost Celts, descended from Celtic tribes who migrated from Central Europe in the Iron Age, bringing their language, their art, their gods. In this telling, to be Irish is to be Celtic to the bone. The two words are almost the same thing. But when geneticists sequenced the DNA of ancient people who lived and died on the island of Ireland thousands of years ago, that story quietly fell apart. Because the great Celtic arrival left almost no genetic footprint at all. So here's the real question this video is about. If the Irish bloodline isn't Celtic, if the Celtic invasion barely shows up in the DNA, then who were the people who actually became the Irish? And why has an entire nation's identity been built on a name their own genes don't support? Hold on to that. Because the same DNA that dismantles the Celtic myth also reveals that the Irish are one of the oldest, most continuous peoples in all of Europe, rooted on that island for 4,000 years. We'll come back to it, and when we do, it changes everything. But first, forget the idea of the Irish as latecomer Celtic tribesmen. That's the first lie to go. The story of the Irish begins not in the Iron Age, but around 6,000 years ago, with the first farmers to reach the island. And their ancestry traces back, through the Mediterranean, across a chain of migrations, all the way to the early farmers of the ancient Near East. These were not primitive fringe dwellers clinging to the edge of the world. These were the people who built Newgrange. Sit with that name for a moment. Newgrange is a vast stone temple in the Boyne Valley, a mound of stone and earth engineered so precisely that on the morning of the winter solstice, and only then, a beam of sunrise light slides down a narrow passage and floods the inner chamber. It was built more than 5,000 years ago, older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt, older than Stonehenge. The Neolithic Irish were master astronomers and monument builders. And recent DNA from inside Newgrange revealed something even more startling. A burial pointing to a powerful ruling dynasty, a hierarchical society with something like god-kings, on an island supposedly inhabited only by simple tribes. This was a sophisticated civilization, thousands of years before the Celts. Then, around 4,000 years ago, came the second great chapter. And this is the one that made the Irish who they are today. A new people arrived in the Bronze Age, part of a great migration sweeping across Europe, carrying a stream of ancestry from the vast steppe grasslands to the east. And when scientists sequenced the DNA of these Bronze Age settlers in Ireland, they found something astonishing. These people were, essentially, already modern Irish. If uncovering the truths that history tried to bury is what you're here for, take 1 second and subscribe. That's the entire reason this channel exists. Because here's where the whole story locks into place. Those Bronze Age settlers carried the exact genetic signatures that still define the Irish today. The Y chromosome lineage that dominates Irish men, the blue eyes, the ability to digest milk, and even the gene for a hereditary condition so common in Ireland it's nicknamed the Celtic disease. By 4,000 years ago, the genetic recipe of the Irish people was essentially complete. And here is the twist that changes everything. That was centuries before Celtic language and Celtic art are thought to have arrived on the island. Read that again. The Irish genome was set, locked in, before the Celts. So when Celtic culture finally reached Ireland, it did not arrive as a wave of new people replacing the old ones. It arrived as a language, an art style, a set of myths, washing over a population that was already there, already ancient, already Irish. The Celtic invasion, as a genetic event, essentially never happened. The Irish didn't become Celtic by blood. They adopted a Celtic identity, laid it over a foundation that was already thousands of years old, which reframes the entire story. Celtic was never the Irish bloodline. It was a beautiful, powerful idea the Irish embraced and clung to, and it's easy to see why. Under centuries of English rule, a proud, ancient, distinctly not English identity was worth everything, and the great Celtic revival of the 1800s wove it into the soul of the nation. The label did real work. But underneath it, the DNA tells a deeper truth. The Irish are not a branch of some wandering Celtic tribe. They are one of the most rooted, continuous peoples in all of Europe, direct descendants of the astronomers who built Newgrange and the Bronze Age settlers who never left. They just spent 3,000 years calling themselves by a name that was younger than they were. And for the tens of millions across the world who carry Irish ancestry, in America, in Australia, across the diaspora, a DNA test that traces an unbroken line back to that island isn't a shock. It's a homecoming. It's the recognition that your roots don't stop at some Celtic tribe in the Iron Age. They run down through 4,000 years of continuity, to the builders of a temple older than the pyramids, on the greenest edge of the world. The science simply caught up to a depth the island had been holding the whole time. And this is the part that reaches past one people. Because the Irish story isn't only about the Irish. It's a mirror held up to all of us. Every nation carries a name it gave itself, Celtic, Saxon, Roman, whatever the label happens to be. And almost always, the people underneath that name are older than the name itself, rooted deeper than the story on the surface. The Irish were never simply Celtic. And if you dig down under anyone's identity, yours included, you find the same thing. The label on the tin is always younger than the blood inside it. We are all older and more continuous than the names we were handed. The Irish just happen to sit on top of a temple that proves it. So tell me, do you carry Irish ancestry, and did you always think of yourself as Celtic? And which people should we uncover next? Drop it in the comments. Yours might be the next video. And subscribe to find out who we dig up next. There are a lot more buried truths where this came from.